Thank you for tuning into my presentation. I will be talking about modern events that are shaping Guatemala. With a population of 13 million people, Guatemala is the second most populated country in Central America. Most recently, Guatemalan citizens have been in the global spotlight as emigration from the country has increased dramatically. The Republic of Guatemala was home to a flourishing Maya civilization for the first millennium AD. The Spanish colonized the region in the mid-1500s, and after more than 3 centuries, the country gained its independence in 1821. In this presentation, we will be reviewing some important events in Guatemala's recent history that may serve to explain the current situation in the country. On July 2, 1954, a U.S.-supported coup was led by Guatemalan exiled Colonel Carlos Castillo-Armas. He overthrew the democratically elected president Jacobo Arbenz. Arbenz had legalized unions and he had introduced agrarian law reforms. As a former Spanish colony, the country had been ruled by an oligarchy of wealthy landowners. There was and arguably still is a marked disparity between the wealthy and the poor, and that land reform had benefited thousands of rural farmers and families that had depended on the land. In 1952, land that was not actively being used was expropriated and former owners were compensated. At that time, the United Fruit Company, an American company, was the largest landowner in Guatemala and was affected immensely by the new law. Around that same time, in the United States, the fear of communism was growing. As a result, President Eisenhower approved PB Fortune, a CIA operation which funded paramilitary groups that opposed President Arbenz. Castillo-Armas eventually installed himself as president, and the U.S. administration cast him as a hero for his victory over communism. Once in office, he removed voting rights for illiterate Guatemalans and canceled the new agrarian reform law, revoking the work of his predecessor. Castillo's appointment also led to the arrest of individuals considered communists. Thousands of people were imprisoned without a fair trial, and the public became resentful in regards to the dismantlement of the previous administration. The coup was just the beginning of a brutal civil war that showed the stark divide between the rich and the poor. Mayan insurgents became very involved in the struggle for economic and social justice, as they were among one of the most marginalized groups and were consequently the most affected by military forces and right-wing militias. The civil war lasted over 3 decades, and thousands of people were killed and eternally displaced or disappeared. The International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala has been working in Guatemala since 2007. It was created at the request of the government of the country based on a comprehensive agreement on human rights. The international organization has been credited with a dramatic decrease in homicides in what has been known as one of the most violent countries in the world. CCIG is innovative in the aspect that it works together with national institutions, specifically the Attorney General's office, to develop a truly democratic rule of law and to carry out its commission. From 2017 to 2018 alone, 11 impeachment requests were filed. In 2018, 65% more hearings were held in comparison to the previous year. The overall mission of the CCIG is to promote a law-abiding society, an integrated justice system, and judicial transparency. The CCIG is funded by multiple international donors, including the UN and the United States. Molina served as president of Guatemala from 2012 to 2015. In the 1980s, he served as Guatemala's director of military intelligence. Later, he was appointed as the presidential chief. Molina was considered a leader of the Guatemalan army that favored a negotiated resolution of the 30-year-long Guatemalan Civil War. Molina represented the military in the negotiations with guerrilla forces. In the early 2000s, Molina founded the Patriot Party and ran for the presidency in 2007. Despite losing, he ran once again in November 2011 and won with 54% of the vote. He served as president until 2015, when he was accused of being involved in a multi-million-dollar corruption scheme involving the country's customs service. The case stemmed from an investigation by the UN-supported CICIG. The scandal prompted mass street protests in Guatemala in 2015, which culminated in the resignation and arrest of Mr. Perez Molina and the former Vice President Roxana Baldari. In January 2017, the Patriot Party was ordered to dissolve by a court case. Morales was elected to be president of Guatemala in 2015, only 1 month after the resignation of Otto Perez Molina. During his presidential campaign, he held the upper hand against his opponent, former First Lady Sandra Torres, who was seen as part of the political elite that have historically taken advantage of Guatemalans' trust. Jaime Morales won on a platform of ethicality as well as his non-existent ties to the political elite, which helped him rise through the ranks. His campaign slogan was "Ni corrupto ni ladrón," which translates to "not corrupt nor a thief." Fast forward a few years into his presidency, Morales announced that the CCIG's mandate would not be renewed. President Morales defended his decision by stating that the commission is politically motivated and threatens Guatemalan sovereignty. These actions come after the CCIG investigated people that worked closely with Morales, including his brother-in-law and son. Soon after, the president himself was under investigation in regards to irregular campaign funding. His action is legal but condemned by the Guatemalans themselves as well as international governments. While Canada, Germany, and the EU have condemned the Commission's expulsion, the United States has not commented on the Commission specifically. In the past, U.S. administrations have quickly intervened when the CCIG has been in danger. The last time the CCIG was threatened was under former President Otto Perez Molina. But currently, under the Trump administration, they have not taken a clear stance in terms of Morales' decision, although the State Department has put out general support for anti-corruption. On November 19, 2008, a mere 5 months after an estimated 200 people died after being buried by volcanic ash and mud in June, the Volcán de Fuego, or Volcano of Fire, erupted once again. The eruption sent large amounts of ash and smoke approximately 6 miles into the sky, engulfing several regions with ash. The most affected areas were small towns near the colonial city of Antigua, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that has survived several volcanic eruptions. Towns like El Rodeo and San Miguel Los Elotes were not as lucky. The death toll rose to an estimated 175 people. According to CONRED, a national entity that focuses on national disaster assistance, stated that more than 4,000 people were evacuated, leaving many low-income people displaced. The eruption of Fuego is the biggest in more than 4 decades. The volcano is part of the Ring of Fire and is one of several active volcanoes out of 34 in the Central American country. Approximately 6,890 acres of coffee farms are located near the volcano's slopes, which were ruined by the ashes. This caused an estimated loss of 0.91% of Guatemala's coffee production, a large source of employment for rural Guatemalans. In the photos here, starting from the left, it's a man after he had rescued his dog, and the top local Guatemalan citizens serving as volunteers to help their community members and find buried people. The volcano, El Volcán de Fuego, and on the bottom, the aftermath of the volcano. On November 2018, a Guatemalan court sentenced a former soldier to more than 5,000 years in prison for the massacre of approximately 171 people in what is considered one of the worst atrocities in the country's 36-year civil war. Santos Lopez Alonso belonged to an elite squad known as the Caibiles, and had participated in the killings of nearly all the men, women, and children in the farming village of Dos Eres on December 7, 1982. He was sentenced 30 years for crimes against humanity and an additional 30 years for each of his 171 victims, totaling approximately, or exactly, 5,160 years. The maximum sentence someone can serve in Guatemala is 50 years, but this serves as a huge accomplishment for a country which has been historically unable to punish people using the full extent of the law. In this event, changed the course of life for many of the affected people of this town, including the man pictured in the right lower hand corner, a man who was separated from his son for more than 3 decades before finding out that he was not killed in that horrible event. In 1999, Bill Clinton visited Guatemala. He formally apologized to the people of Guatemala by saying that the Guatemalan government had perpetrated most of the atrocities during the Civil War and was supported by Washington. President Bill Clinton apologized for that in 1999, saying that it was wrong to back and support such a regime. The United States, since that point, tried to become a champion of transitional and transnational justice and played a key role in finding and prosecuting Caribbean members living in the United States. Although the Guatemalan Civil War ended more than 23 years ago, the aftermath is still felt throughout the nation. At the end of the Civil War, the fighting parties signed a peace accord and agreed to the National Reconciliation Laws. Although forgiveness was given and accepted, it was agreed that the state would punish anyone found guilty of crimes against humanity, massacres, or kidnapping. However, this month, April 2019, a group of legislators want to repeal all exceptions to the amnesty. Allies of the president complain that exceptions to the amnesty law are disproportionately applied to the military. If they succeed, many accused perpetrators of crimes would walk free so long as the amnesty is signed by current President Jimmy Morales. The Civil War claimed the lives of more than 200,000 people, mostly indigenous Maya. Some 45,000 victims disappeared, and more than 1 million people were displaced internally. The changes would free dozens of prisoners convicted of severe human rights violations and halt the prosecutions of about 12 people awaiting trial. Moreover, it would end the possibility of any future prosecutions. And if Guatemala does not follow through with what they had agreed upon, it would not only affect the transitional justice in Guatemala, but all over the world going forward. And if war criminals are not punished as the law requires, it may worsen impunity in Guatemala and add to the forces that are causing its people to leave the country. As I end this presentation, I realize that all of the events I have shared are either sad or horrible, and they do not do justice to what appears to be a beautiful country. So in order to remedy that, I'll be sharing at least one interesting tradition in Guatemala. So from March 22nd to April 25th, there are many processions commemorating the death of Jesus Christ during what is called Semana Santa, or Holy Week. Massive floats are carried throughout towns, displaying depictions of a crucified Jesus, and they are hoisted by hundreds of people wearing purple hoods, a Catholic color steeped in religious symbolism. And Christianity was introduced by the Spanish, and now the religion is a fusion of both Christian and indigenous traditions. The alfombras pictured, or carpets, are made primarily from flowers, and as you can see are very detailed and they are very time consuming to make, but these are tokens of sacrifice, again going back to indigenous traditions. And this week of ceremony usually ends with fireworks on Easter Sunday, and the Guatemalan Easter celebration is considered one of the largest in the world. As you can see from the Easter processions alone, Guatemala is a country steeped in culture, tradition, and religion. The country has many things to offer. It is a home of volcanoes, rainforests, and ancient Mayan sites. Unfortunately, the people of Guatemala have had to live through recent events of unfortunate nature and unfavorable foreign intervention and domestic politicians that did not have the citizens' best interests. And this has resulted in some devastating consequences for the people of Guatemala. And the country seems to be in an uphill battle to bring about positive change and rule of law in their country. I just want to thank anyone who has made it this far into the presentation. A special thank you to Professor Hinojosa, who has allowed me to work on this project for the Politics in Latin America class. I have enjoyed learning about Guatemala, a country that I had little previous knowledge about before this. I feel I've gotten a good understanding of the country's political history and some of their more current events. So yeah, thank you.